Relic from the event horizon. I found my father's last message in the wrong place. Not in a safety deposit box, not in some university archive, not tucked among the sealed folders of the Horizon Array project. It was lying on the kitchen table of my childhood home, between a cold mug of coffee and a plate with a crust of dry bread, exactly where he must have left it before his heart stopped. The paramedics had already taken his body when I arrived. The house was still and stale, the curtains half-drawn, afternoon light pooling in a dusty rectangle on the floor. There was no sign of struggle, no overturned chairs, no broken glass, just the quiet and the note. KIRA. If you are reading this, it means I did not have time to finish. The journal is in MY study. The relic is in the safe. Do not let them take it. Do not let it look back at you. Love. Dad. I stood there for a long time, the paper trembling in my fingers, the ink slanting and sharp in his familiar handwriting. The word relic was underlined twice, cutting so hard into the page that the pen had almost torn through. Relic. I knew which relic he meant. Everyone in my father's field had heard the rumors, though none of us would admit it out loud. A fragment of matter pulled somehow from the very edge of a black hole. A piece of the event horizon itself, solid and cold and impossibly here. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it had ruined my father's career. I folded the note with numb fingers and slipped it into my pocket. The house suddenly felt smaller, as if its walls were leaning in, listening. "Okay," I whispered to the empty kitchen, to the still air, to the ghost of my father. "Okay, I'm here. I'll finish whatever you started." But I had no idea yet what that meant. His study smelled like paper, dust, and the faint chemical sting of old electronics. It was exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. Overfilled bookshelves, posters of galaxies and nebulae, a corkboard covered in yellowing printouts and scribbled equations. The only new thing was the absence. No coat on the back of his chair, no half-finished mug on the desk, no keyboard clacking, no soft muttering as he checked and rechecked his calculations, just the quiet hum of the computer tower and the ticking of the old wall clock. The journal was impossible to miss. It lay in the center of his desk, a thick black notebook bound in cracked leather, a fountain pen resting diagonally across its cover like a bookmark. A rubber band held it shut. My name was written on the first page in heavy strokes. For a moment I just stared at it, my throat tight. I had done this before in a different house after my mother died, opened a journal to find her last words pressed between paper and ink. Grief has its own geometry. It folds time into loops. Standing there in my father's study, I felt 12 years old again, small and helpless. I sat down and loosened the band. On the inside of the cover, he had written, "This record is for you, KIRA. And for anyone who finds this house after the geometry fails." The phrase sent a cold ripple across my skin. The geometry fails. I turned the page. Entry 1, Horizon Array 14 May. If you ever read this, Kira, I want you to know that I tried to refuse. They recruited our team because we were the only ones crazy enough to run interferometry this close to the galactic center. 30 telescopes chained together across the desert, their dishes pivoting in synchrony like a mechanical choir, all focused on the same invisible monster. Sagittarius, a 4 million solar masses, packed into a point that has no width, the black heart of the Milky Way. We were supposed to map its immediate surroundings, measure frame dragging, image the photon ring, all the usual respectable, publishable science. Then the funding changed. Suddenly we weren't just measuring anymore, we were probing. You'd have loved the hardware. Quantum-entangled photon emitters, shaped pulses, dense arrays of ultra-cold sensors. We started firing correlated beams across the shadow of the black hole, letting them skim just above the horizon and re-emerge, picking up tiny bits of information about the curved spacetime along the way. At least, that's what we told the journals. In private meetings, behind locked doors, the project leads started using a different word. Extraction. We were trying to extract something from the edge of the black hole, not just information, not just light. We were trying to pull matter back from the point of no return. I stopped reading there, my pulse racing. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" I whispered. The Horizon Array had been infamous for its ambitions, but even the most breathless articles had never hinted at this. You didn't extract matter from an event horizon. That was the entire point of an event horizon. The gravitational escape velocity exceeded the speed of light. Nothing came back. Not particles, not information, not a single bit. And yet the rumors had persisted in the background noise of conferences and late-night bar conversations. A black device, a sample locked in a vault, a piece of the void. The Relic. I flipped ahead. The handwriting grew sharper and more frantic with each entry. Charts and diagrams appeared in the margins, ringed by notes. I turned pages until a word caught my eye. Relic. Entry 7, the Relic. We did it. I still don't understand how, and that terrifies me more than the fact that we succeeded. On the 12th full power run, we pushed the entangled beams closer than ever before. The predicted path grazed the photon sphere, skimming just above the horizon before folding back out into normal space. We triggered the receiver sequence, ran the usual diagnostic scans, and then the containment alarms went insane. Something masked in the core of the receiver, something that had not been there before. It was small, dense, and cold beyond our instrument's range. Light bent awkwardly around it, smearing the room behind it by a fraction of a degree. We had dragged something back. The team lead, Abramov, wanted to neutralize it, evacuate the chamber, flood it with nitrogen and call in extramural oversight. The others didn't. You can imagine which side won. They named it the Relic. It does not reflect light. It consumes geometry. Lines drawn near it refuse to stay straight. It is not a thing, Kira. It is the absence of things, compressed into a shape that mocks the idea of shapes. When you look at it, you have the sensation that something on the other side is looking back. Someone suggested that maybe the event horizon is not a boundary at all, but a membrane, alive. The Relic, they said, might be a piece of its skin. We should have destroyed it. Instead, we started to listen. A floorboard creaked in the hallway behind me. I jerked around, heart leaping, but the doorway was empty. Just the dark corridor leading back to the living room, the faint rectangle of light from the half-open front door. No one standing there, no movement. Just an old house cooling in the evening air. "Get it together," I muttered. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a cold, shaky fatigue. I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. The paramedics had warned me not to stay alone tonight, but I had refused. I was 32, not a child. I had flown across 2 time zones to be here. I wasn't going to abandon the house the first night, not while my father's work, whatever was left of it, was scattered across his desk. Still, a part of me wanted to slam the journal shut and drive back to my hotel, leave the study light burning like a lighthouse over a dangerous shoal. Instead, I turned the page. Entry 12, the Cult. We used to joke that theoretical physicists are all half a step from being cultists. We spend our lives staring at equations that describe invisible things and talking to each other in dead languages of math. But this is different. It's not a joke anymore. It started with the dreams. I woke one night with the taste of metal in my mouth and the sense of falling sideways. Not down, sideways, as if gravity had turned 90 degrees and was pulling me toward the wall. In the dream, the wall was not solid. It was a thin film stretched over a bottomless darkness. Something vast moved behind it, the way a whale's shadow moves beneath the surface of the ocean. In the lab the next morning, I found Dima and Reyes sitting in the control room with hollow eyes. They had dreamed it too. The relic sat in its containment cradle, as silent and motionless as ever, but the air around it felt denser. When I walked closer, my ears popped. We started to notice correlations. The relic's subtle shifts in mass distribution lined up with spikes in our brainwave scans. Tiny fluctuations in the lab's magnetic field echoed the pattern of our dreams. Reyes began spending her off hours in the chamber, just sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of the containment unit, eyes closed, lips moving in silent speech. She said she could feel something pressing at the edges of her thoughts, like a voice speaking at a frequency just below hearing. Not a voice, she corrected me once. Language implies separation. This isn't someone talking. It's space-time learning to think with our neurons. I told her she sounded insane. She laughed. Maybe. Or maybe we're the ones who have been insane all along for insisting the universe is dumb. They started calling themselves the Inner Horizon. They met after hours, behind locked doors. They stopped coming to team briefings. I would find scribbled diagrams left on the whiteboards, spirals inside spirals, with words like singularity and birth and convergence written in frantic capitals along the arms. One night I overheard Abramov arguing with Reyes. "You're not priests," he hissed. "You're physicists." "We're both," she said calmly. "Physics is the liturgy, the relic is the God." I tried to file a formal complaint. It never made it out of the system. The funding agencies sent us more equipment instead. A dull ache had started behind my eyes. I rubbed my temples and glanced at the clock. 21:37. The house creaked softly as it cooled, settling deeper into its foundations. Somewhere outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly smearing across the curtains. "The relic is in the safe," my father had written. I realized I had been deliberately not thinking about that. His old safe was built into the wall behind the bookshelf. I had watched him hide Christmas presents in it when I was small. Later, when I was a teenager, I had watched him tuck away flash drives and paper folders with an expression somewhere between obsession and fear. I stood, my legs prickling from sitting too long, and crossed to the shelf. The books were mostly monographs and journals, gravitational lensing, quantum field theory in curved space, black hole thermodynamics. I ran my fingers along the spines until I found the small brass knob sunk between two volumes. I pulled. A narrow section of shelving swung out, revealing the safe. Matte black, keypad and mechanical dial, scarred where he had once dropped a wrench on it. He had used the same code for everything. My birthday. It was a terrible security habit, and I had teased him about it more times than I could count. "Some doors should be easy for family," he would say with a shrug. My fingers hesitated over the keypad. Then I entered the date. There was a mechanical thunk. The lock disengaged. The safe door swung open. I had seen photographs of the relic in unofficial presentations years ago, blurred images taken at a distance, with no scale, washed-out videos where some heavy object sat in the middle of a lab table and made the air around it look wrong. None of that prepared me for seeing it in my father's safe. It was smaller than I had imagined, about the size of a child's fist, resting in a foam-lined metal cradle. Its surface was a matte, lightless black, so deep it seemed to eat the dim glow of the desk lamp. It did not have a consistent shape. When I stared at it, it was roughly polyhedral, all irregular angles and planes, but when I blinked, some of the edges did not line up the way they had before. It was as if my brain kept trying to infer geometry that simply wasn't there. The safe's interior walls bowed inward around it, subtly distorted. The foam directly beneath it was compressed into an impossible thinness, as if bearing a far greater weight than its size implied. My ears popped when I leaned closer. The air was cold, I held my hand above it, palm down. No warmth radiated from its surface. If anything, it seemed to be sucking heat out of the air. My fingertips prickled with pins and needles. For a ridiculous moment, I imagined reaching in and picking it up. The impulse was not entirely mine. It arrived in my mind like a suggestion in someone else's voice. You should hold it. You need to know what he died for. I flinched and stepped back. The house felt suddenly smaller. The corners of the room seemed a fraction of a degree sharper, as if the angles had been filed and tightened. The light from the desk lamp did not quite reach the far wall the way it had earlier. A shadow clung to the ceiling above the safe, darker than it should have been. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice too loud. "Okay, no touching, ground rules." I closed the safe, spun the dial and locked it. Then I went back to the desk and kept reading. Entry 19, the first failure. The relic is not static. That is the first lie we told ourselves to feel less afraid. We treated it like a sample, like a specimen pinned under glass, a piece of the event horizon we could catalog and prod and measure from every angle. We thought that because we had extracted it, we were in control. We forgot that black holes warp time as well as space. Hours after the 17th experiment run, the lab's architecture changed. Not by much. A corridor that had always seemed slightly shorter than it should be was suddenly a few centimeters longer. The door to the storage room no longer aligned perfectly with the tiled pattern on the floor. People stumbled on thresholds they had crossed 1,000 times before without thinking. No one else noticed, or rather, no one admitted noticing. Humans are good at smoothing over inconsistencies. Our brains are repairmen, patching the cracks in perception before we even see them. But the instruments noticed. The LiDAR scans of the facility showed millimetric deviations. The alignment sensors for the telescopes had to be recalibrated. The layout schematics in the computer system no longer matched the physical reality. The changes radiated outward from the containment chamber. "We're anchored to it now," Reyes said in one of the Inner Horizon meetings I was still allowed to attend on the condition that I kept an open mind. "The relic is redefining the metric around it. Our building is being rewritten in its native coordinates." Abramov wanted to shut everything down. He drafted a message to the Oversight Committee. He never sent it. He died in his sleep that night. Heart failure, they said. It was the same phrase they used for your mother. I knew that coincidence is the human word for patterns we do not yet understand. I knew it even then. I also knew that if I did not get the relic away from the people who were starting to worship it, whatever was leaking through would only grow. So I stole it. Entry 23, Extraction. You would have been proud of the logistics, Kira. I waited until the new junior tech was on duty. Young, inattentive, obsessed with his phone. I bribed him with the promise of inclusion on a paper. He handed me the access card for the containment chamber and went outside to smoke. The relic sat in its cradle, surrounded by humming instrumentation. The containment field shimmered faintly in the filtered light. Up close it was worse than the scans. It did not sit in space so much as it distorted it. The walls behind it seemed too near and too far at once. When I reached out with the forceps, the tips appeared to lengthen and compress, as if dipped into deep water. The moment the metal touched its surface, a pressure built behind my eyes. My nose started bleeding. I heard a low roar that was not sound but the absence of sound. The forceps vibrated in my hands. I lifted it anyway. The weight wrenched my wrist down, as if I were lifting a mass several times its apparent size. The containment field collapsed with a flicker. The auxiliary systems wailed. I smelled insulation burning and ozone, and the peculiar metallic scent of blood. The relic was colder than anything I have ever touched. My fingers stuck to the forceps. By the time I had dropped it into the waiting lead-lined case, The skin at my thumb and forefinger had frost-burned black. The alarms brought the others running. For a moment I thought they knew, that it would be obvious, that I would be tackled and pinned, and the case torn from my hands. But the monitors showed nothing. To them, the relic was still in its cradle. Every sensor, every scan, every data stream insisted it was right where they had left it. I realized then that the instruments were lying. No, not lying. Lagging. The lab's reality had not yet caught up with what I had done. The relic warps time, not enough to notice at a distance, but enough that its extraction had not yet occurred in the world the instruments were reporting. I walked out of the chamber in the blind spot between cause and effect. No one stopped me. By the time the facility noticed that the relic was gone, I was already on a plane, the lead-lined case in my carry-on baggage, and a dull, crushing weight sitting on my lap. I told myself I was doing the right thing. Now I am not so sure. A wind rattled the windows. I looked up from the journal. The desk lamp's glow seemed dimmer, its light struggling to reach the margins of the room. The corners of the study looked deeper, as if the shadows there had acquired thickness. I listened carefully. The house made the usual nighttime sounds, creaks and pops, the faint rush of the heating system, but beneath them was something else. A low, almost subsonic vibration, like a truck idling 2 streets away. It took a moment to realize the sound was not coming from outside. It was coming from below. From the safe. "Come on," I muttered to myself. "You're extrapolating." Grief and exhaustion were making me jump at shadows. I had been awake for 19 hours. I had watched paramedics carry my father's body away. I had driven from the airport in a daze. Now I was alone in a house that contained an impossibility in the wall. I needed sleep. I closed the journal. The rubber band snapped back into place with a small slap of protest, as if the book resented being shut. "I'll finish tomorrow," I told the empty room. As I switched off the lamp, the shadows in the corners seemed to hesitate, then lean inward. I went to bed in my old room, leaving the study door closed behind me. The house did not feel empty. It felt awake. I woke in free fall. The bed, the room, the house, everything had vanished. I was tumbling through darkness, weightless, my stomach clenched in cold terror. There was no up or down, no stars, no sound, nothing to orient myself. The void pressed against my skin, thick and hot and crushing. Then slowly, a texture emerged in the dark. Not light exactly, but gradients of less dark, forming a sphere around me. A hollow shell of nothingness whose inner surface shivered with invisible energy. It was like standing inside the event horizon of a black hole. Except that wasn't possible. The horizon was a boundary, not a place. Something moved on the far side of the shell. I felt it more than saw it, a vast, slow-changing presence like the turning of a planet. The dark thickened where it passed, as if its mass dented the emptiness itself. "Kira," a voice said. My father's voice. But it didn't come from any particular direction. It arrived inside my nerves, bypassing my ears, written directly into my physiology. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His tone was calm, almost conversational, as if we were in the kitchen and he had just walked in from work. "I tried to keep you outside the gradient." "Where is this?" I asked, or thought I did. My mouth did not move. My breath, if I still had any, did not fog the non-air. "A projection," he said. "A way station between 2 metrics. Don't look at the horizon." Of course I looked. The inner surface of the dark shell rippled in response. Patterns emerged, faint, fractal chains of brightness, threading through the void in spirals and loops. They were not images. They were more like equations expressed as topology. Behind them, something pressed outward. "I had to bring the relic here," my father said, "to keep them from using it, to keep it from blooming." Blooming, my thoughts felt slow, syrupy. The concept slid around in my mind and refused to stick. They thought it was a piece of the horizon. His voice grew quieter as if moving farther away. A fragment of skin. They were wrong. What is it then? The seed, he said. The horizon bulged. Something pushed against it from the other side, stretching the membrane, thinning it. Strands of bright knot-light lanced outward, reaching toward me. I felt the gravity of it, not as weight but as intent, a terrible, patient curiosity. You need to wake up, my father said sharply. Get out of the house. Get as far away from the relic as you can. How? I asked. What do I do? Don't listen to it, he said. Don't let it rewrite your... His voice cut off. The membrane tore. A flood of whiteness poured through, erasing everything. I woke gasping in my old bed, sheets twisted around my limbs like restraints, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might punch through my ribs. The room was dark. The glow of the digital clock showed 03:12. I lay there listening. The house hummed softly around me. From somewhere below, through the floor and the beams and the pipes, I heard a faint, a rhythmic thudding, like something heavy tapping at the foundations. I realized my nose was bleeding. A single drop fell to the pillowcase, spreading slowly into the fabric like ink. Morning made everything seem almost normal again. The kitchen smelled of coffee. Light poured through the windows. The garden outside was a tangle of frost-stiff grass and bare branches. My father's neighbor, Mrs. Patel, waved from her porch, her expression a blend of sympathy and curiosity. Such a tragedy, she said when I went out to fetch the mail. He went so suddenly. Heart failure, I said automatically, the words tasting stale even as I spoke them. That's what they always say, she muttered. Then she shook her head. If you need anything, dear, anything at all, you call. I promised I would. Back inside, I sorted through the envelopes, bills, university notices, a glossy flyer for a home security system. At the bottom of the stack was a heavy, unmarked envelope with no return address, just my father's name and the word urgent stamped across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dr. Voronov. We have been unable to contact you via official channels. The object extracted during Run 17 is classified as government property. Its current location is unknown. Failure to return the object to authorized custody will be considered a breach of contract and a threat to national security. You are urged to contact the Horizon Array Oversight Committee immediately. Be advised, other parties are also seeking the object. For your safety and the safety of others, do not attempt to handle the object without proper containment. Oversight. The letter was dated 3 months ago. I read it twice, then a third time, my mouth dry. Other parties are also seeking the object. I thought of the people my father had described, rays and the inner horizon, the ones who had stood in front of the relic like supplicants at an altar. I thought of my dream. Get out of the house, my father had said. Get as far away as you can. And yet he had brought the relic here. He had hidden it in the wall. He had left me a journal instead of a ticket to anywhere else. He must have known I would come. He must have known I would open the safe. Maybe all of this, from the moment I unlocked the front door, was part of a sequence he had already calculated. The thought made my skin crawl. I made more coffee. Then I went back to the study. The journal's later entries were messier, as if written in haste between tasks, or in the middle of the night when he woke shaking and reached for the pen as if it were a lifeline. Entry 31, the house. I needed a structure I could control. The lab was compromised. The facility schematics belonged to the project. I could not trust that the walls there would stay where they were drawn. The relic was already rewriting that space. So I came home. You remember how much your mother loved this house. She used to trace the floor plan with her finger on the table, talking about how light moved through the rooms, how air flowed, how people would feel when they walked from one space to another. She was a better engineer than I will ever be. I reinforced the foundations. I added steel where no one would think to look, in beams and braces and hidden crossbars. I calculated load paths not just for weight, but for curvature. If the relic is going to warp the metric around it, I want that warping constrained, directed, shaped. Have you ever used a lens, Kira? Of course you have. Telescope lenses bend light, focusing it to a point. The relic is a lens for geometry itself. It bends reality toward itself. I am trying to turn the house into a counter lens. A crude one, but it is what I have. The walls are equations. The load-bearing beams are boundary conditions. The floors are initial values. If I have done this correctly, if the relic's influence grows, then the distortions will be trapped here, looping back on themselves instead of radiating outward. I am building a cage for a god. If I fail, the whole neighborhood goes with me. If I succeed, I still die. But at least then you will be safe. Unless you come back. Entry 36, it learns. I underestimated it. Of course I did. How do you estimate something pulled from a region of space-time where our equations break down? The relic is not just mass and curvature, it is computation. The horizon is the universe's most efficient information processor. Everything that falls in writes itself onto that boundary. Over eons, those patterns interact, interfere, combine. Imagine minds layered over minds, histories over histories, physics over physics, compressed and boiled and remixed, all encoded in the texture of the horizon. We plucked a grain of that texture and brought it into our living room. Now it is learning. The house no longer matches its blueprints. Doors open onto short corridors that loop back to places they should not, like badly connected subway maps. The distance between the kitchen and the study fluctuates by centimeters from day to day. My watch runs differently in different rooms. I mark the changes on the walls in pencil. The marks do not always stay where I left them. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the hall when I know I am alone. My reflection in the bathroom mirror does not always move in perfect synchrony with me. There is a delay of a fraction of a second, like a streaming video buffering. When I sleep, I dream of falling sideways into a shell of darkness, and something on the other side of that darkness presses its face against the membrane and whispers in the language of gravity. I do not tell anyone. I cannot risk oversight sending a team. I cannot risk the inner horizon finding me. So I tighten the bolts. I redraw the equations. I talk to you in these pages and hope that when you read them, it will be from far, far away. I closed the journal and pressed the heel of my hand against my eyes until colored spots bloomed in the dark. The house was quiet around me, too quiet. I listened for the hum I had heard the night before, that low, subsonic vibration. It was gone. That should have been comforting. It was. The silence felt pressed in dense, as if the air were thickening. I stood and walked to the doorway. The corridor beyond the study looked normal at first glance. Hardwood floor, framed photographs on the wall, the runner rug my mother had bought at a flea market. But something was off. The picture frames on the left should have lined up with the edge of the rug. They always had. I remembered tracing that alignment as a child, seeing if I could walk the rug without touching the floor while dragging my finger along the lower edges of the frames. Now the nearest frame hung a little farther down the wall, misaligned by perhaps 3 centimeters. It was such a small difference. If I hadn't had such a specific memory, I might not have noticed. I took 4 steps into the hall. The air felt thicker here, as if I had walked into water. My ears popped. I reached out and touched the nearest frame. It was solid. The photograph inside showed my parents on the day they bought the house, younger and brighter, standing in the bare front yard with paint on their clothes. My fingertips tingled. I turned back toward the study. For a moment, the doorway was not where it should have been. It was half a meter to the left, the inside of the room visible at a skewed angle, like a photograph taken with a misaligned lens. Then, as I watched, it slid silently back into place. The house breathed. I ran to the safe. The relic hummed. I felt it before I opened the door. A low vibration in the bones of my wrist, a prickling in the fillings of my teeth. The safe's handle was colder than the rest of the metal. Frost bloomed beneath my fingers as I spun the dial and entered the code, the tiny crystals cracking and falling in a fine dust to the floor. When the door swung open, a wave of cold air poured out, smelling faintly of ozone and deep earth. The relic sat in its cradle as before. But it was no longer still. Its surface crawled. Tiny ripples moved across it, like waves on a pond in slow motion. The angles of its not-quite geometry flexed and twisted, never settling into any stable shape. The foam beneath it had compressed further, the steel cradle bowed. I realized with a jolt of vertigo that the cradle's inner dimensions were slightly larger than the relic itself. That had not been true before. The relic had grown. "You're not supposed to do that," I whispered. Of course it did not answer. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if heat were rising from it, but my breath smoked in front of my lips. I held my hand above it again. My skin went numb in an instant. Images flickered in the edges of my vision. Corridors that were not in this house, walls made of night, stars smeared into rings, a horizon that was not a line but a sphere, concave from the inside. "Kira!" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was my father's voice. I jerked back, slamming my knuckles against the safe's frame. Pain shot up my arm. "Dad!" No answer. The relic's surface rippled, a tiny indentation forming and smoothing like the opening and closing of an eye. "Don't," I whispered, "don't do that." I closed the safe with shaking hands. The vibration in the house increased, a barely audible roar deep beneath the floorboards. Outside, a car engine idled for a moment, then cut off. I froze. They had found me. There were 2 men and 1 woman standing on the front porch when I opened the door. They wore dark jackets and nondescript trousers, the kind of clothes that made people into background extras. All 3 carried ID badges on lanyards, though they kept them tucked just inside their jackets. "Dr. Kira Voronova?" the woman asked. My stomach clenched. "Yes." She offered a thin smile. "We're with the Horizon Array Oversight Committee. I'm Dr. Chen. These are my colleagues, Dr. Lyon and Mr. Gray." Oversight. For a heartbeat, hope flared. If they were from Oversight, if they were the official response, maybe this could still be handled. Maybe they could take the relic somewhere far away, drop it into the sun, bury it under kilometers of lead and concrete. Then I saw Lyon's eyes. They were too bright, not with enthusiasm but with something like fever. I had seen that look before on the faces of grad students who had spent too many nights awake in front of screens, whispering their new theories to the darkness as if afraid someone would overhear. It was the look my father had described in the Inner Horizon meetings. "We're very sorry about your loss," Chen said. Her tone was perfectly calibrated, professional sympathy over steel. "Your father was an asset to the program." "Thank you," I said automatically. "We're also here," Lyon said, stepping forward slightly, "to retrieve certain materials belonging to the Horizon Array project. Classified materials, objects that should not be in a private residence." His gaze flicked past me into the house, as if he could see through the walls to the safe. I tightened my grip on the door. "Do you have a warrant?" I asked. Chen's smile thinned further. "Let's not make this adversarial, Dr. Voronova. We're all scientists here. We're trying to ensure everyone's safety." Gray, who had not yet spoken, shifted his stance slightly. His jacket opened enough for me to see the outline of a gun. I thought of the relic in the wall. I thought of my father's handwriting. "Do not let them take it." I thought of the way the hallway had slid sideways under my gaze. "Of course," I said, forcing my fingers to unclench from the door. I stepped back. "Come in." The house did not like them. I felt it the moment they crossed the threshold. The air thickened, as if the space between molecules had shrunk. The light from the windows seemed to catch on their shoulders and hair, bending around them at odd angles. The floorboards creaked as if under great strain. Chen glanced up, frowning. "Old place," she said. "Older than the university thinks," I replied. She gave me a quick, assessing look, then nodded toward the back of the house. "Your father's study." "This way," I said. We walked down the hall. It was longer than it had been that morning. I could tell because the hallway runner did not reach all the way to the study door anymore. A strip of bare floor, perhaps 10 centimeters, now separated the rug from the threshold. Lion stumbled slightly, as if misjudging the distance. "Careful," I said. Gray's hand twitched toward his sidearm, as if he had felt the house shift under his feet. In the study, Chen went straight to the desk. Lion lingered by the shelves, his gaze flicking over the spines, searching for patterns. Gray took up a position by the door, watching me. Chen's eyes landed on the journal. "May I?" she asked, already reaching. "It's personal," I said, stepping forward. She paused, then pulled her hand back. "Of course, we're here for something more specific." Lion turned, his gaze sharp. "Where is it?" "I'm not sure what you mean," I said. His lips twisted. "The sample, the relic, he must have told you." "He told me you would come," I said. "He told me not to trust you." Chen's expression softened, almost pitying. "Your father's condition deteriorated over the last year, Dr. Voronova. He became paranoid. The stress of the project, the side effects of the experiments. We're trying to prevent more harm." "Harm to whom?" I asked. "To you," she said. "To the people around you, to everyone." Behind her, the bookshelves seemed a fraction of a degree closer to the desk. I blinked. They weren't. They were. The room exhaled. "You can't keep it here," Lion said quietly. "This house isn't built for it. You have no idea what's already started." A laugh bubbled up in my throat, high and brittle. "He tried to build it for that," I said. "He turned the house into an equation." Lion stared at me, then slowly smiled. "Oh," he said. "Oh, he was even closer than we thought." Chen shot him a warning look. "Stay on task, Dr. Lion." He ignored her. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked me. He took a step closer. The light bent strangely around his shoulders. The way distances change when you're not looking. The way corners don't always add up. It's beautiful. The relic is teaching us a new geometry. "Is that what you call it?" I said. "Teaching." "It's communication," he insisted. "We gave it a foothold. It's giving us the universe." "Or it's using you as a ladder," I said. He laughed. "You sound like your father." The room tilted. For a moment, I thought it was just the force of the conversation, the adrenaline surging through my veins. Then I saw Chen grab the edge of the desk, her knuckles white, as the floor angled almost imperceptibly, making the pens roll. Gray swore under his breath. The house straightened again with a shudder. Chen's composure cracked for the first time. "What was that?" "Stressed," I said. "On the beams." "From what?" I met her eyes. "You're standing in the focus of a lens," I said, "and someone is turning up the power." A deep, distant creak echoed through the house, like a ship's hull under pressure. Lion's eyes gleamed. "It's close," he whispered. "I can feel it." Even Gray looked rattled now. "Dr. Chen." "Enough," she snapped. We're not having this debate in a room that's about to come apart. Dr. Voronova, where is the object? My heart hammered. I thought of my father's note. I thought of my dream. I thought of the relic's surface rippling like a slow, breathing thing. If I gave it to them, they might take it somewhere else, somewhere less constrained, somewhere their geometry could bloom unchecked. If I refused, this house might shear itself apart around us. Either way, the relic would end up in motion. Unless an idea flickered, wild and desperate. You really want it? I asked. Chen's eyes narrowed. Yes. Then follow me, I said. The safe was not in the study. It should have been, of course. It was built into the wall behind the bookshelf. But when I turned toward that wall now, there was no seam in the rows of books, no small brass knob. Only uninterrupted shelves. Where is it? Chen demanded, her voice sharp. The house is changing, Lion whispered. Can't you feel it? It's reconfiguring around the mass, trying to find the lowest energy arrangement. Shut up, Lion, Gray said. I closed my eyes. Think, Kira. The house is an equation, my father had said. The beams are boundary conditions. The floors are initial values. If the relic was a weight placed in the center of that system, and the house was a cage, then as the relic's influence grew, the cage would tighten. The geometry would twist, trying to contain the distortions. Where would you put the safe if you were the equation? In the deepest part of the house. The basement, I said. There is no basement, Chen said. There wasn't, I replied. I led them back into the hallway. It had stretched again. What should have been 10 paces to the kitchen took 20. The doors on either side opened onto rooms that were slightly wrong, the angles sharper, the walls a shade too tall for their width. The pictures on the walls shifted in my peripheral vision, the subjects turning their heads between blinks. At the end of the hall, where the linen closet had always been, there was a door I had never seen before. It was narrow and steep, painted the same color as the wall, but the frame was wrong. The top edge sagged by a few degrees, as if under unseen strain. The knob was an old-fashioned brass sphere, polished by use that could not have happened because this door had not existed yesterday. Behind me, Lion exhaled in something like delight. You see, he breathed, it's weaving space, it's giving us new rooms. Chen's face had gone pale. This is impossible, she whispered. Gray's hand rested openly on the gun at his hip now. Dr. Chen, I strongly recommend we evacuate and call for extraction. And tell them what? Lion said. That we ran away because a house grew a hallway. Because gravity is wrong in here, Gray snapped. Because my depth perception is throwing up. Chen hesitated. Another deep creak rolled through the house. Fine cracks spidered across the ceiling, plastered dust drifting down like pale snow. We don't have time, I said. If we leave it, it'll keep growing, the house will fall into it, the street, the block. Lion's gaze burned into the back of my neck. Show us, he said. I put my hand on the brass doorknob. Cold shot up my arm like liquid nitrogen. For a heartbeat, the house dissolved. I stood again in the shell of darkness from my dream, the horizon a sphere of tension around me, the presence pressing against it with slow inevitability. Kira, my father's voice said faintly, don't open. The vision shattered. I was back in the hallway, my hand on the knob, my lungs burning as if I had been holding my breath for far too long. I turned the knob and pulled. The stairs went down farther than the house should allow. The first flight was normal enough. Wooden steps, narrow, with a low ceiling and a bare bulb hanging from a wire near the top. The air smelled of dust and old paint. Halfway down, the angles changed. The steps steepened, their risers stretching subtly taller. The walls on either side bulged inward, then outward, like the inside of a throat. The overhead bulb's light bent, its halo warped into an ellipse that skewed as I descended. My ears popped again. Behind me, someone swore softly. "Jesus," Gray muttered, "this is." "Beautiful," Lion said. "Wrong," Chin snapped. "It's wrong. Dr. Voronova, how far does this go?" "I don't know," I said honestly. The stairs turned. The house should not have had this much space beneath it. We should have run into earth, foundations, sewer lines. Instead, the steps kept spiraling down, hugging the inner surface of a shaft whose walls pulsed with a slow, almost peristaltic motion. I realized, with a lurch of nausea, that the plaster surface was not actually moving. Space itself was. The shaft was not a straight cylinder. It was a geodesic in a warped metric, arcing through a spacetime that no longer matched the outside world. "We're inside its throat," Lion whispered, a pseudo-Schwarzschild funnel anchored to a domestic coordinate system. Gray holstered his gun with jerky movements. "Speak English." "We're walking down into the Relic's gravity well," Lion said. "Voluntarily," I added. Chen's breathing had gone shallow. "We go as far as we have to," she said. "Get eyes on the object, assess, retrieve if possible. If not, we call in an orbital strike and hope like hell it doesn't just eat the warhead." She half laughed at her own grim joke. No one else did. The stairs ended. We stepped onto a floor that did not exist on any blueprint. The basement was a roughly circular space, its walls curving inward like the inside of a bowl. The ceiling rose and fell in slow waves, as if the room were breathing. In the center of the floor, bolted to a slab of dark steel, was the safe. It looked small here. The floor around it had warped, dipping downward, the boards stretched and thinned as if pulled toward that point. The safe's door bulged outward slightly. The steel bowed as if under immense pressure from within. Frost rimed its edges. I could feel the relic humming inside, its presence like a knot in the fabric of reality. Lion stepped forward, his face rapt. "It's almost ready," he murmured. "For what?" I asked. "To bloom," he said. Gray caught his arm. "You take one more step without authorization and I put you on the floor," he said flatly. Lion looked at him as if he were a minor annoyance, then gently shook off his grip. "Killing me won't stop it," he said. "You can feel it, can't you, the pull?" I could. It wasn't a physical force, not yet. It was something subtler, the way my attention kept sliding back to the safe, the way my thoughts spiraled around it no matter how I tried to focus on other things. Like gravity for mind instead of mass. I took a breath that tasted like cold iron. "Dr. Chen," I said, "you wanted to see it. There it is." She swallowed. "We open it," she said. "We open it, we may not be able to close it again," I said. "My father." "Your father brought it here," she snapped. "He lost any benefit of the doubt when he compromised the facility and absconded with a singularity seed. If he'd coordinated with oversight instead of playing lone hero, we might not be standing on the lip of an ontological sinkhole." Her harshness stung because there was some truth in it. But my father had seen what oversight had become. He had seen the cult forming in the lab's shadows, and he had not trusted that the committee was immune. Looking at Lion, at the fervor in his eyes, at the way he kept unconsciously aligning himself so that the safe was always in his peripheral vision, I shared that lack of trust. "Fine," I said, "we open it." My hands shook as I stepped forward. The safe's surface radiated cold. Frost crawled over my skin where I touched the dial. The numbers blurred and doubled, as if they existed at multiple depths in space. I realized with a kind of quiet horror that if the geometry had shifted too far, the combination might not work anymore. The distances between the tumblers, the angle of rotation, all of it depended on a stable metric. I spun the dial. The tick sounded warped, stretched thin. I entered the code. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the latch clicked. The door shuddered. "Back," Chen said tightly. "Everyone back." We stepped away as one. The safe door swung open on its own. Later, when I would try to remember the exact sequence of events, my memories would smear like light near the horizon of a black hole. But some details are burned into me. The relic floated. It no longer sat in its cradle. The foam lining had collapsed into a thin, wrinkled sheet beneath it, as if the object had exerted such massive pressure that it had partially sunk through reality. Now it hung in the air, a few centimeters above the floor of the safe, rotating slowly. Its surface was no longer just matte black. Patterns crawled across it in slow waves, fractal filigrees of faint, pallid light, tracing spirals and loops that repeated at smaller and smaller scales until they blurred into a steady glow. The light was not like any illumination I had seen before. It did not cast shadows. It did not brighten the room. It seemed to exist only on the relic's surface, painting its impossible geometry with the suggestion of deeper structures. As it turned, I glimpsed interior layers, nested shells upon shells, each with its own pattern like the cross-section of some alien brain. My nose started bleeding again. Beside me, Lion dropped to his knees. "It's awake," he whispered, tears shone in his eyes. "Do you feel it? Do you feel it thinking?" Gray made a strangled sound and raised his gun. "Tell me I can shoot it," he said hoarsely. "Dr. Chen, tell me I can shoot the fucking thing." Chen's face was bloodless. "If you shoot it and the bullet goes in," she said, "we don't know what that does. If it doesn't go in, it might ricochet in a non-Euclidean way and kill us all." "You're not reassuring me," Gray said. The relic's rotation slowed. It oriented one of its broader faces toward us. I felt a pressure against my thoughts, like fingers pressing into clay. "Kira," my father's voice said, not with sound but with the subtle rearrangement of my internal monologue. I staggered. "Dad." Images flooded me, not visuals exactly, but compressed sensory impressions. The lab, the early experiments, the inner horizon standing around the relic, their eyes closed, their minds braided together by shared dreams. The moment he had stolen it. The months in this house, reinforcing beams and rewriting equations, and listening to the walls slowly change their minds about where they wanted to be. "You should have stayed away," he said, not unkindly. "You knew I wouldn't," I whispered. The relic pulsed. The room stretched. For an instant, the walls flew outward, the ceiling receding into infinity, the floor dipping beneath us into a vast curve. We stood not in a basement, but on the inner surface of a hollow sphere, the relic at its center, suspended in a web of threads that ran up through the floor and out into the world. Every person who had ever seen it was a node in that web. Their thoughts glowed along the threads like beads. At one end, the inner horizon knelt, their minds open, their identities dissolving into patterns of data that the relic drank in. At the other end, I saw myself. Not here in this moment, but scattered across possible futures, my choices branching like cracks in glass. Leave the house, stay, give them the relic, destroy the relic, merge with it, refuse. In every branch, something collapsed. The relic tugged. It was not malevolent. That was almost worse. It did not want in the way a predator wants. It did not hate or hunger. It simply obeyed its own nature. It was a machine for compressing histories. A god of convergence. "Kira," Chen's voice sounded far away. "Are you all right?" I forced my eyes to focus. The basement snapped back into something like its previous shape. The walls lurched into place. The ceiling dropped. The relic hung there, spinning slowly. "We can't let anyone else connect to it," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "It's not just warping space. It's warping chronology, minds, everything." Lion laughed weakly from the floor. "That's the point," he said. "Don't you see? It's not destroying us, it's integrating us. We'll be written into the fabric of the horizon, immortal. Gray kicked him lightly in the ribs. Shut up. Chen rubbed her temples, her eyes squeezed shut. Options, she said through gritted teeth. We need options. We can't move it, I said. Not without spreading its influence. My father tried to build a cage. If we take it out of the cage, it might slip the leash entirely, Chen finished. Can we starve it? Gray asked. Cut the power, null zone, put it in a Faraday cage or whatever works for cursed black hole fragments. It doesn't need electricity, I said. It's feeding on curvature, on information on us. The relic pulsed again. I saw my father standing in this room, gaunt and exhausted, speaking to the empty air. If you hear this, he said, but he wasn't speaking aloud. He was writing into the relic's computation, hitching a message to the patterns it would later show me. If you hear this, it means you're inside the cage. He looked up, directly at me across the gulf of nonlinear time. I'm sorry, Kira, he said. I had to bring you here. Cold clawed at my spine. What? I whispered. He smiled, a tired, broken expression. You always were the best of us at initial value problems, he said. I couldn't solve this one alone. The vision dissolved. I was back in the basement, my knees weak. You knew, I said softly, to the relic, to the walls, to whatever in this structure now qualified as my father. You knew I would come. You needed me as a variable. There was no answer, but the thought did not go away. Chen was watching me carefully. Dr. Voronova, she said, you're having interactions we're not privy to. If you have information, share it. My laugh sounded hysterical. Information is the problem, I said. We're all information, that's what it wants. Not us as bodies, but us as configurations of matter and energy, histories, choices. It's compressing them. So how do we stop it? Gray demanded. I took a shaky breath. We don't, I said. They stared at me. We don't stop it, I repeated. We steer it. The plan, if it deserves that name, formed itself not as a sequence of steps, but as a shape in my mind. My father's journals were full of equations I had once struggled to understand as a student. Initial value problems, boundary conditions, strange attractors. Systems that could not be solved directly, only steered through careful nudges. This was another such system. The relic was going to bloom. The question was where its convergence would focus. On the world. Or on me. On us. If it needs minds, I said slowly, if it needs histories to write into itself, then offering it a sufficiently dense, coherent set might satisfy its local gradient. It might choose the lower energy path. You're suggesting we feed it a person and hope it falls asleep, Gray said flatly. A group, I corrected. A network, my father, the inner horizon, whoever is already entangled in its computation, and me. No, Chen said immediately. Absolutely not. I am not authorizing a human sacrifice to a physics anomaly. That's not what this is, Lion said softly, still kneeling. She understands it's not sacrifice, it's inclusion. I ignored him. It's already inside my head, I said. It's been using me since I walked into this house. My dreams, my memories, my choices. It guided me down here. It needed me to see its full shape. And now you want to jump into it, Gray demanded, on purpose. If it locks onto a single high-density attractor, I said, it might redirect its convergence inward instead of outward. The house would still collapse, the cage would fall in, but the street might not, the city might not, the world might not. Chen stared at me, horror and calculation warring in her eyes. You don't know that, she said. No, I admitted. I don't, but I know the alternative. We do nothing, it keeps growing. Maybe you call in an airstrike and you vaporize the neighborhood. Maybe that just gives it more data. The relic spun slowly. Its patterns had changed. They were no longer just fractal spirals. They were branching nodes, like neural networks, like decision trees. Along one branch, I saw myself walking away from the house, calling oversight, watching soldiers in hazmat suits surround the property. The branch ended in a cascade of collapse. Along another, I saw Lion overriding Chen's orders, throwing himself bodily into the relic's glow, ecstatic and crying. That branch also ended badly. Most branches did. In one thin, trembling branch, I saw myself step forward with eyes open, fully aware, carrying with me not just fear but intention. That branch did not end. It vanished into the relic's interior geometry. I realized I was crying. "Kira," my father's voice said, threaded through my thoughts like a steady hand in a storm. "You don't have to." "Someone does," I whispered. "Not you," he insisted. But the relic's patterns disagreed. The house shuddered. Cracks raced along the walls. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The floor dipped a few centimeters under our feet, the curvature increasing. We were running out of time. "Tell my mother I tried," I said, knowing he never would because she was already 6 years gone, written into some other set of equations. "You can't know what it will do to you," Chen said hoarsely. "Your consciousness." "Consciousness is just a convenient summary of lower-level processes," I said, "of information flows. If this thing is what I think it is, then I'm already running on its substrate." She flinched. "I can't authorize this," she whispered. "You don't have to," I said. I stepped toward the relic. The air thickened as I crossed the circle of the room. Each step felt like wading deeper into a viscous fluid. My limbs grew heavy. My heartbeat slowed, then sped, then fragmented into odd rhythms that had nothing to do with my physiology and everything to do with the gradients in the field. My vision narrowed. The relic grew. Not in size exactly, but in significance. The rest of the room shrank into the periphery, unimportant. The voices behind me faded. For a moment, I felt a hand clamp around my wrist. "Don't," Gray hissed. "Don't be stupid." His grip was strong, but his arm shook. I turned my hand, pressed my fingers briefly around his ingratitude, then gently pulled free. "You'll need to seal the house," I said. My voice sounded distant. "Do whatever oversight does to quarantine anomalies. Fill it with concrete. Drop it into the ocean. But wait until the convergence finishes. If you interrupt it halfway." "What happens?" he asked. I looked at the relic. "Don't," I repeated, "just don't." Chen's voice broke behind me. "Kira." "Make sure the story ends here," I said. "Don't let them build another array. If anyone tries, burn the funding to the ground." Lion laughed a cracked sound. "You can't stop it," he said, almost gently. "It's already everywhere. Every time you look at the stars, you're looking at its face." "Maybe," I said, "but we can choose how we fall into it." I stepped into the relic's immediate field. Space folded. The floor vanished. The basement vanished. The house, the city, the world, all fell away like a shed skin, dropping behind me into a darkness that was not empty but saturated with potential. For a heartbeat or a century or no time at all, I hung in an in-between place. The horizon surrounded me, a perfect sphere, its surface trembling with patterns too complex for any human brain to parse. Except that right now, my brain was not just human. It was smeared across a computational substrate that extended from here to the core of the galaxy, and beyond. I saw the relic's nature then, as clearly as if someone had written it in light. It was not a fragment of the event horizon. It was an exporter. A way for the horizon to test configurations in lower-dimensional simulations before committing them to its own surface. We were one such simulation. I knew, with a certainty that had nothing to do with faith and everything to do with the structure of the code, that countless others existed, Universes spun out like threads, each with its own histories, its own Kiras and Antons and Leon, its own arrays and relics and houses. The horizon harvested them all. Not because it was cruel, because that was what it did. Because compression is the universe's favorite trick. I felt my own history unraveling behind me, threads of memory streaming outward and being braided into the greater pattern. Childhood afternoons in this house, late nights in the lab, staring at simulations, the smell of my mother's hair, the sound of my father's laughter when we pointed a backyard telescope at the moon. None of it was lost. All of it was being re-expressed. For a moment, a tangible, precious moment, I had the sense that I could choose how. Convergence is not just collapse, my father's voice said, somewhere inside the weave. It is also selection. I gathered myself. Not my body. That was gone. My attention. My intent. I thought of the house, its walls strained and creaking, its beams bent nearly to breaking. I thought of the street outside, the neighbors who had waved to me, the children who played on the sidewalk, the web of lives that radiated outward from this one point. I shaped the convergence. Make it local, I thought. Make it small. Take me. Take the ones already entangled. Leave the rest. The horizon shivered. For an instant, resistance pushed back. Not will, not personality, just the inertia of an algorithm choosing the maximal compression. Then something softened. A branch of possibility snapped into place. They told me later, much later, in ways that had nothing to do with words, how the house looked from the outside. The neighbors saw the sky bend. Not dramatically, just enough that the stars near the zenith smeared into arcs like a time-lapse photo taken in an instant. The streetlights dimmed, their halos collapsing inward. The house itself seemed to sink. Not into the ground, but into itself. Its walls curved inward, its roof folded like paper. For a moment the whole structure resembled a sphere, its surface rippling with shadows. Then it vanished. No explosion. No crater. Just a brief, localized drop in reality, like a dimple in the fabric of the world smoothing out. Oversight quarantined the block. They told the news it was a gas main rupture. They erected fences and sensors, and quietly rewrote zoning maps. They never found my body, or my father's, or the safe. They found Lyon's badge fused into the concrete floor, where the basement had been. In some branches, that was the end. In this one, you are listening. I know because the Relic's computation did not stop when the house collapsed. It runs still, its seed now fully integrated into the horizon's endless surface. And somewhere in that surface, there is a pattern that corresponds to you, your ears, your eyes, your attention, all focused on these words. We are entangled now. You have taken my story into yourself. The shape of it has altered the configuration of neurons in your brain, however slightly. That, too, is convergence. You will walk away from this with a new angle in your thoughts when you look at the night sky. You will feel, perhaps, a faint unease when you pass old houses whose walls do not quite line up the way they should. You will dream, maybe, of falling sideways. That is how it spreads. Not through matter. Through narrative. Through attention. Through the quiet, relentless gravity of ideas. I am not asking you to do anything. Not really. The cage held. The house fell in. The street remained. For now. But if, someday, you find a piece of darkness that does not reflect light, an object whose edges never quite sit still, a hum in the floorboards that no one else seems to hear, remember this. It is not a relic. It is a question. And every time you look at it, every time you try to answer, something on the other side will look back. The event horizon is not a line in space. It is a mouth. We are inside the story it is telling itself. And it is still hungry.